A book review of Gichin Funakoshi's book, Karate do Kyohan, and what it is, it's the master text of Shotokan karate. Although Gichin Funakoshi never called it anything other than karate, or karate-do, the way of the empty hand. Some people call it Shotokan. Okay, so this book is actually very excellent, and for a second I'm going to talk as somebody that took Tang Soo Do. Now, Tang Soo Do was founded by a guy named Hwang Ki, who was a Korean that recreated the Korean martial arts. He borrowed heavily from Gichin Funakoshi, or it's believed Gichin Funakoshi. We know it's karate, but Hwang Ki never said what type of karate. But we can assume that it's Shotokan karate, and it's from Gichin Funakoshi's books, which were most readily available. Now, what you'll see in this book, if you're familiar with Tang Soo Do, is that some of the hyungs have the names. Hyungs are forms. They have some of the names of the Shotokan kata, which is also form. Also, the one-step fighting, the one-step Ilsu Sik, or the one-step kumite, is very similar. A lot of it. What is actually interesting, and these are the tidbits you lose when you don't read the inspiration to people like Hwang Ki, when you don't go back, or when you assume that Tang Soo Do must be a better art because it came out after Shotokan. In the Karate do Kyohan, what you see is anybody that's taken a grappling art, such as judo or jujutsu, is probably familiar with doing some of the takedowns from the kneeling position. And this is a couple reasons. One, it's closer to the ground, so you're not going to get hurt as easily because you're not falling as hard on the ground. But also, it adds a new dynamic, a new way of moving the body, and it's very interesting. Now, we incorporate some of this stuff in Tang Soo Do, or at least my instructor did because of his marine training. So there's a lot of kicking from the ground and things of that nature that we had that not necessarily were in other Tang Soo Do schools, but that came more so, I think, from the Marine Corps than it did from, say, Karate Do. Now, what's interesting, though, is, and I do want to make a quick note about the way karate is taught today. I was lucky enough to get a traditional instructor on the tail end of before they started, the insurance company started making these foam pads mandatory. So I was taught on a hard wood floor, which is actually, I think, superior and a hell of a lot more safer than these foam mats for teaching karate. For the simple fact, the first time I was ever on one of these mats, I damn near broke my ankle, and it actually resulted in a ganglion cyst from the synovial fluid escaping into the outer layer and forming a cyst that had to be surgically removed quite a few years later. I waited 13 years to have it removed. But what was interesting is these new foam mats, they're not good for pivoting or moving in the way that you would kick with karate or with Tang Soo Do or Taekwondo or any of these kicking martial arts. You could probably throw a power kick from these types of mats, but they're not good for the finesse kicks and the footwork necessary in karate. That's just my note on that. So it's interesting how the arts have to adapt. Another thing is you will not see, what is not in this book, because it's probably hard to cover anyway, is kumite. Now, what kumite is free fighting. Just freestyle fighting. That's not covered outside of the one-step fighting, probably because it's just too complex. And also, what is kumite? What is free sparring? It's the application of techniques in a freestyle manner by the intuition of the two martial artists or more martial artists fighting one another. But more or less, this book is excellent. I would highly recommend it. It covers the basic training you need to know, how to do different sets, how long you should work out. For example, people might not understand this. Master Funakoshi recommends only 15 minutes to begin with, then working your way up to an hour of karate training. Another thing people don't know, it's not in this text, but in other books by Funakoshi, for example, Funakoshi recommended that his teachers, his instructors that were under him, had a main means of income that was not karate, because this way they didn't have to rely on karate to be their sole source of income, so they didn't have to bow down to the capitalistic pressures to make more money to sustain themselves, which I think is very interesting, because today you see how capitalism has affected the quality of the martial arts. It has changed them greatly. It has caused a lot of rhythmic dance techniques, a lot of introduction of weapons that nobody would be carrying down the street, and it has fundamentally altered the way a lot of these martial arts are practiced. In fact, I think capitalism is the whole reason you see this explosion of things like Krav Maga and MMA, because what you see is you see it being geared toward the consumer. Whereas a lot of people, and what people don't understand, a lot of people that are teaching this stuff, you don't know what their training level is, because a lot of these are taught in certification type things, and you don't know who's certifying the people that are teaching you. So you go to take Krav Maga, it might be great from one guy and totally terrible from another guy. And that's all for this video. I highly recommend the book. It's Karate do Kyohan by Gichin Funakoshi, and that's all.